I was the one when you needed love. I was the one when you needed love. Only the secret you wanted more. I was the hell that you needed. Oh, I was the one when you needed love. I was the one.
Welcome to BaldPolitiKs, where we take an alternative look at the world of politics and give a voice to the unheard. My name is Peter Kearney, and in this edition, the 7th of December 2016, I'm going to be speaking to Jim Naureckas of the media watchdog body in the United States, fair.org. He's going to be speaking to us about the media coverage during the US presidential elections recently and what we can expect from a Trump presidency. But before we get to that, let's have a look at some of the significant political happenings on this day, the 7th of December, as well as some of the political birthdays. And in 1917, World War I, the United States declare war on Austria-Hungary. In 1941, it's when the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor and bring the United States into World War II. And in 1949, the Republican government of China moved from Nanking to Taipei in Taiwan. This is on the 7th of December. Political birthdays, we have the birthday, of course, of Noam Chomsky, well-known political commentator, linguist and philosopher. And in the north of Ireland in 1962, it's the birthday of the Democratic Unionist politician Jeffrey Donaldson. So now let's go to the interview of this fortnight, where I spoke to Jim Naureckas of fair.org.
From reading Fair and Counterspin, there's been quite a lot of talk of late and since the election about the election itself. One thing that comes up or came up quite a bit is this thing called horse race politics. It's been mentioned in the coverage of the election. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's covering the election as though it were a horse race, about who's ahead, who's behind, and what are the tactics that are being used to try to take the lead. And it really boils down to viewing the election from the point of view of the politicians, from the candidates, and not from the point of view of the people. And I think they've really got the telescope reversed, and they're looking in the wrong end. Because elections are really about the citizenry and what they want and what they need. And media really ought to be talking to the public, asking them what they think is important, and then going to the candidates and saying, well, what are you going to do about these things that the public thinks are important? Instead of looking to the politicians to say what's going to be the agenda, and then delivering that to the audience that are presumed to be just passive observers of this process.
Okay. Yeah. Now, the statistics that were quoted on your site are quite alarming. 47% in one of Benjamin Johnson's article compared to just 12% spent on policy. Does that not ring a bell? Would that not ring a bell somewhere with voters that, look, we're not actually hearing about anything. We're just hearing about the politicians?
Absolutely. And even that 12% that is devoted to policy is devoted to the policies that the candidates and the media decide that they want to talk about. It's largely, a lot of it was about terrorism, about what we're going to do about Syria. Basically the issues revolved around which people in Syria are we going to bomb, and that was what the media wanted to talk about. I don't think that's what the public wanted to talk about. They want to talk about the issues that were going to affect their lives, and really examine. The job of the media is not just to transmit the claims made by the politicians, but to investigate those claims and see if the claims that they're making are actually true. And that is a part of the job that the media really shirk from and try to avoid doing.
Okay. Now, who's driving this? Is it the politicians themselves? Is it their PR spin people, or is it the corporate media, the mainstream media that are behind it?
Well, the media get to decide in the end what they're doing with their airwaves. There is a symbiotic relationship between the candidates, the campaigns, and the political journalists who are crafting the coverage. They turn to the campaign insiders as the people who provide them with analysis and news, because you can, if you whisper something to the journalist rather than announce it on Twitter, then it's a scoop.
Yeah.
And that's that is on the level of the day-to-day job of the journalists. They are very reliant on what they've defined as news from newsmakers. From the point of view of the owners of the press, who in the end are the people who write the checks and get to pull the plug if they want to, and so they're ultimately responsible. It's a money-making operation. We have, in the United States, turned over our media system almost entirely to for-profit corporations that are supported mostly by advertising. And so the job of, if you are the CEO of a media outlet, then your job is to deliver eyeballs to advertisers. That is what you are paid to do. That is why you have a great big house on Long Island, because you do that effectively. And there was Les Moonves, the CEO of CBS, one of our networks, made these remarks that were kind of shockingly honest, where he was talking about how Trump may not be good for America, but he's good for CBS. Because because of Trump, the campaign had become so heated. There was so much money being spent to try to block Trump as the nominee. That money is going to the networks. It's overwhelmingly it's TV spending.
So he was great advertising for them.
Yeah, it's and just he was literally laughing like a James Bond villain about how what a great year CBS was having because of Trump.
Right.
And he was like, go Donald, he said.
Right. Okay.
And you could tell that he didn't think that Trump would be a great president. That was kind of implicit in what when you're saying this may not be good for America.
Right.
But he didn't care, because it's not his job to help America. It's his job to help the shareholders of CBS.
Right. Okay. It's shocking, really. So it's all about the numbers, and there's nothing to do with the politics or what it could do for people. So where did that last election leave corporate media in America? Because the impression was, I don't know how true it is, but the impression was that the corporate media were backing Hillary, but she didn't win. So where does that leave them?
I think it is true that the corporate America, Trump was not their candidate. It was very clear in the Republican race that they wanted somebody other than Donald Trump to be the standard bearer. And in the general election, when you looked at campaign contributions coming from corporations, the money was going to the Clinton side rather than the Trump side. When the endorsements from newspapers, which are mainly useful as a signal of where the media-owning class comes down, overwhelmingly were for Clinton. I don't think there's been, in the history of elections in the United States, I don't think there's been as one-sided endorsements going to one candidate as there were in this election. And it was to Clinton. But and this is as a media watcher, I think this is interesting, because at the same time that I think that journalists as a class were for Clinton, media owners as a set were for Clinton, I think that the media worked for Trump, because Trump understood the weaknesses of the media better than Clinton did. Clinton assumed that her coziness with journalists, which you can see in the leaked emails from the Democratic National Committee, you can see the close relationship that they had with many journalists. They assumed that would make the media be a useful tool for them. And Donald Trump, because he comes out of reality television, he was a game show host, essentially. That was his main occupation. And he understands what feeds the media beast, and what you do to turn the media story into an advertisement for yourself. And he did it really fairly brilliantly.
And was that behind all of his shocking comments about Muslims, Mexicans, and women? He knew that while they were against them, they'd, as that Doonesbury cartoon said many years ago, they'd no option but to cover him.
Right. Yeah. There was a. I don't want to oversell the idea of Donald Trump as a brilliant tactician.
Right.
I do think he has issues with impulse control. But at the same time, it's easy to overlook the method to his madness. And there was for example, he would often take contradictory positions on issues, and come down as though he were strongly against abortion and at the same time pro-choice. And you couldn't square the two positions. They weren't reconcilable. But he knew that people would hear the position that they were interested in, and assume that was what he really meant, and dismiss the other position as noise. He did this on a lot of issues, and managed to be this sort of all things to all people. For example, he's the pro-worker candidate who thinks that workers get paid too much. It doesn't make logical sense. But if you're listening to hear someone say, I'm for the workers, you could hear him say that.
Yeah.
And if you were looking for him to say, if you were a business person interested in paying workers less, you could also hear that.
Okay. So he told people whatever they wanted to hear at the right time. One thing that came up during the election as well, I mean, I think it's been around for a while, is the idea of voting rights and the Voting Rights Act, that this is being, or people fear that this will be hacked during his presidency. Even already there were a number of people in Ohio and different states who were taken off the register, restrictions on ID. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we're not really that familiar with that system over here.
Yeah, we have a very strange electoral system in the United States. I would love for us to have UN observers come and watch our elections, because they really are a mess. And the Voting Rights Act was already kind of disabled by the Supreme Court. It used to be that you would have to, in areas that had a history of suppressing the vote of African Americans, you would have to get voting changes approved by the Justice Department before you would make them. And the Supreme Court, with a conservative Republican majority, said, "Oh no, that really isn't necessary. I mean, who in this day and age, who's going to suppress votes?"
Right.
And it's a shameless ruling, because clearly the Republican Party has as one of their main tactics discouraging people from voting, and getting you get the right voters to come out, and you win the election. That's absolutely integral to their strategy. And in this election, when they had a freer hand, because you could make the changes, and then people can go to court and try to get those changes rolled back. But it turns out it's easier said than done. Once the changes have been made, to get them taken back, even if courts say, this is actually a violation of the law, by you're putting obstacles in the way of people voting on the basis of their race. It's really much harder to get those voting rules taken back than to not have them put in place in the first place. Right. And so, the Trump won by winning a few key states by very narrow margins. I think that we may be having some recounts, and while I don't really expect the recounts to reverse the results of the election, I think it would be very interesting in terms of giving us a chance to see how many votes were thrown out.
Is there a possibility, like an outside possibility, that the result could be overturned?
Well, the Republicans are fighting like heck to try to stop the recount from happening.
Yeah.
Which makes you think that they're not 100% confident that that it wouldn't change the results. I wouldn't bet the house on it, certainly.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah. She apparently has led the popular vote, or she's leading it still by about 1 million votes or something like that. It's how the system works, isn't it? It's each state is weighted rather than having a straight vote.
Right. Yeah. Each you have a winner take all contest in each state, and then each state gets a certain number of electors, and they are the people who actually choose the president. Mm-hmm. And it's a system that the smaller, mostly rural states have greater representation than the larger urban states, which is a benefit for the more conservative party that gets more support from those areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now that he is on the cusp of being elected, where do you? I mean, it's a big question, but let's start, I suppose, with international relations, if we could, in places like the Middle East or Syria or whatever it might be. What do you see his presidency doing any differently, or will it do anything differently?
Well, it's very hard to say because of the peculiar relationship that Donald Trump has with policy and with reality. It really is a person who has taken, if you look at his foreign policy statements, there are statements that seem to be advocating strongly for a non-interventionist kind of America First outlook. And at the same time, he is making statements that are incredibly bellicose, that suggest an iron fist policy that will force people to do what he wants by sheer military might. Which of these is going to be more of the dominant policy? It really, the people that he has picked to do national security and military policy have been people with very bellicose rhetoric. The Secretary of Defense nominee, the National Security Advisor, these are people with kind of a fire-breathing record. The National Security Advisor, Flynn in particular, with a strongly Islamophobic record. He's declared that Islam is the enemy. It's hard to be more close than that. So, the United States has moved towards giving the president more and more power in military activities. With the drone war, ever since 9/11, we've had this sort of open-ended blank check given to the president saying that he can do whatever he needs to do to fight the very vaguely defined terrorism, people associated with the World Trade Center attack, which has been used by Obama, to wage long distance war in 6 or 7 different countries. And now Donald Trump will be the one who gets to decide, basically on his lonesome, which countries he wants to bomb and who he wants to bomb in them, which is, a lot of power to give any president, and especially a president with the personality of the temperament of Donald Trump.
So it's wait and see, wait with trepidation, really, to see what he does at home and abroad.
Yeah, I would say that given the dominance of the Republican Party they have the presidency, they have both houses of Congress, because they blocked Obama from appointing a Supreme Court justice for the past year. They will have again a majority in the Supreme Court. So I would say that if there is to be a counterweight to Donald Trump in international affairs, it's going to come from outside the country.
Okay.
So it's up to Dublin, really.
Okay, we'll do what we can. And I'll just wrap up really on the media coverage as well. The other alarming statistic I saw, actually I wasn't really sure if I got this right or not, that in 2016 CBS, ABC and NBC had only given 32 minutes to substantive issues. Is that right? 32 minutes seems incredibly low. I mean, yeah.
It is not, from their point of view as delivery service for advertisers.
Yeah.
The question is, what is going to keep people from changing the channel to pro wrestling?
Right.
And their feeling is that issues bore people, and so are likely to lose viewers. Whereas if you have Donald Trump insulting somebody and that person responding, that's human drama that will keep people glued to the tube. Our contention is that if you really want to attract people's attention, you deal with the issues that are really affecting their lives and deal with them honestly and concretely, and you will build an audience. But that is not a path that corporate media are eager to take, and I suspect that it's a path that their advertisers would be very unhappy with, because the answers to the questions of how do we improve people's lives are often going to be at odds with the interests of the corporations that bring us our news programming in the United States.
Okay, and finally, you guys in FAIR, do you, as media watchdog, as a media watchdog group, do you guys have any fear with Trump's presidency? Do you think he's going to come down on groups like yourselves or other similar groups?
Well, I mean, he has indicated he saw some flag burning on TV protesting his election, and he tweeted that people who burn flags ought to have their citizenship revoked. Now, this is not something that the American judicial system allows for. It's not something you can actually do. It's something he wants to do. So he does not see himself as bound by tradition or legal norms, or So again. Wait and see trepidation is.
Right.
So thanks a million to Jim for his time, and if you want to know more about what they do, check them out on FAIR, FAIR.org, where you can also find out more about their weekly radio show Counterspin, as well as their magazine Extra, all well worth a listen to and a read. So that's pretty much it from us this fortnight. Join us again in a fortnight's time, which will be the last episode of 2016. So until then, from me, Peter Kearney, take care.